Every 5 women in South Africa experiences violence at least once at the hands of their intimate partner. Violence against women, obviously, it's a global phenomenon and not unique to South Africa. And there's no denying that it is widespread here. Is enough being done to understand and safeguard those who suffer in same-sex relationships? It appears not. Research done by the NGO Triangle Project indicates there's an underrepresentation of same-sex intimate violence. What does this mean? Joining me to talk about this is Triangle Project's Health and Support Services Manager, Sharon Cox. Good to have you with us, Sharon Cox. Tell us more about your findings.
Well, Jane, what you say is quite true. The rates of intimate partner violence, broadly speaking, across heterosexual and same-sex loving couples is widespread. For many reasons, the hopeless underreporting of same-sex intimate partner violence is rife, and also really underserviced because of the stigma attached to it, of the reasons of service providers not being affirming. And this is something that's always been looked at through a heteronormative lens.
Yeah, tell me more about that. I mean, why was it, I mean, other than those examples that you've just given or the reasons, why have heterosexual couples seemed to be more behind this sort of action?
Well, I think it's because we live in a heteronormative world, and we've all been raised this way. We've all been raised in a very heterosexist world, a very heteronormative world, and a world where patriarchy is deeply entrenched. And so when people think of intimate partner violence, it is automatically assumed that it is in opposite sex relationships, in heterosexual relationships, where the man is the aggressor and the female is often the victim. So that's very much how gender-based violence and intimate partner violence is viewed in this country.
Were you surprised to see that, especially between women, that you see these same levels of violence against each other?
No, sadly not. It's not something that we were surprised about. It's something that, Triangle have been speaking about for a while, and I think we have 2 research papers out on this phenomena. And it's easy to see why this happens, because at the end of the day, same-sex loving people, whether they be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or a person's identity, whether they're transgender or intersex, it's just one aspect of who we are. So we're made up of so much more than just our orientation and identity. So we've got to realize that the factors that play into why intimate personal violence happens in heterosexual relationships is no different to why it factors into same-sex relationships. So beyond our orientation, beyond our identity, there are other factors that play into it. A person's status in life, whether one person is employed and dependent on the other person, the education levels of one of the partners, the ability...
So is that power abuse then?
It absolutely speaks to power. It speaks to all abusers across the board. It doesn't matter who you are. Abusers really are focused on their sense of power, their sense of control over another person, and how they can wield that power and how they can keep a tight rein on the other.
And tell me, sorry, excuse me jumping in here, Sharon, what leads to violence? Is it this mental power abuse, and where's the trigger?
Certainly that leads to power. So if there are 2 people in a relationship, and there may be others in a relationship, we're made up in all different ways, but if there are two people in a relationship, for example, and one person is dependent on the other financially, which we see in relationships between men and women as well,
everybody, yeah.
then the person that has the least power in a relationship is often the most is the least vulnerable. I'll tell you where it gets different when it comes to same-sex couples, in that in a heteronormative society, there are support structures in place for people who find themselves in that position. So if you were suffering at the hands of a partner and you needed to get out, or you needed to report it, or you needed to have the support of family or a faith community, you would easily find that as a woman who was looking to get out of the situation. Unfortunately, it's viewed differently for, let's say, a lesbian woman, for example. So you have that double closet of, firstly, you're lesbian, and perhaps you're not out.
So possibly there's that stigma hiding behind something that you can't tell friends or family. And also, I mean, we were talking about it just the other day, how police often treat women who report being abused.
Absolutely. So there's this myth, too, that is perpetuated that women, and this speaks to the social constructions of gender and how we construct gender, that woman is seen as gentle and soft and nurturing, and two women in a relationship would surely understand one another because you're both women. But this really overlooks so many other factors. And you're absolutely right in saying going to the police station is an extremely different experience for a lesbian, gay person, transgender person, intersex and non-binary person. It's a different experience because your response to trying to lay a complaint or laying a complaint is going to be different from a heterosexual woman, for example.
People say it's often another level of abuse.
Absolutely, it is, and that's why we speak about that the double closet, because you have the stigma already surrounding intimate partner violence that exists across the board, but then you also have that fear, real or perceived, of going into a police station to lay a charge and having to disclose that the person who is being abusive is your partner, and your partner, for example, is another woman.
And the incredible violence. So if there is that fear, if you can't come out, if you've got nobody to tell, what's your advice? Where should people who suffer from abusive or in abusive relationship, where should they go?
Well, this is also really a difficulty, because in urban centres, so in Cape Town, for example, somebody could easily come to Triangle Project and get the support they needed. Our work has a wide reach, but it is in the Western Cape predominantly, the reach, some in the Southern Cape, some in the Northern Cape. Perhaps if you live in Pretoria, you would be able to find some. If you lived in Durban, you would. But we've got to consider, too, that the areas that are often so overlooked in so much work beyond violence, but here we're focusing on violence, and violence is rife, is what happens to our LGBTI communities that are in more rural areas, where there is no support, where there is no, there may not even be an organization that assists women, let alone being an LGBTI affirming organization. And what happens there? And that is really troubling, because that's where we're seeing a lot of the violence taking place, is in areas outside of the metro and beyond the reach of organizations that attend, that are present in metropole and in more urban areas.
And Sharon, what is it that changes in a relationship, in a loving relationship, regardless of who you are? I know you said that there's often, power dynamics and one might not be working, but how does it change? How does it change to go from love to hate? And why do many victims stay in these relationships?
Right. So it changes for many reasons. It can change, perhaps initially you're in a relationship, it's the butterfly phase, it's the la-la land phase, and then real life kicks in and one person is struggling to get employment, or a person may be ill or differently abled, and these are the things that a lot of the times attracted you to the person in the first place, was who the person was. And now all of a sudden that becomes challenging. I will say too, for LGBTI persons, that that we as LGBTI people also contend with discrimination from structurally from churches and schools and all kinds of places that others would have support in, within families where people are ostracized. And this all leads to adding more strain, adding more stress to relationships. Unemployment rates are high, we know, particularly amongst transgender persons, transgender women and transgender men. But all of these factors come colliding in on one person, which exacerbates the rates of stress, the rates of anxiety, the rates of depression.
Well, Sharon, I'm going to jump in here. Thank you for talking us through this and sharing your findings. And I guess the message is always not to be silent. Sharon Cox there. Thank you. Still ahead tonight, trick or treat. It's our Halloween special.